Hello everyone, Kent Bressler here. I want to welcome you to Kent's Kidney Stories. During our time together over these podcasts, I'd like to discuss kidney disease. I'd like to tell you about my journey as a transplant patient, but also talk about dialysis, kidney donation, and just about anything else that might be of interest. Kent's Kidney Stories, podcast endorsed and sponsored by kidneysolutions.org.
Hello, everyone. This is Kent Bressler, and guess what? We're going to start podcasting, and I want to thank my daughter, Gretchen Rosington, out in Texas, for getting me into this podcasting business. She told me it's a very easy going thing, and you would have fun doing it, and you know a lot about kidney disease, and you can talk a lot. So why don't you think about it? So here I am. I'm going to say a little prayer, and then what we're going to do is talk to a couple gals that I've met with a company called Nunez. Okay, let's pray. Forgive me, Lord, for how I have complained and muttered about how hard this day's been. Forgive me for forgetting that you're with us. Forgive me for forgetting who I am because of what your son Jesus Christ has done. And forgive me for failing to remember the glorious truths and riches I have because of you and the gospel. Father, hear my prayer. Grant me hope at the end of this hard day. Help me to cling to your grace, your wisdom, and your strength. I ask this all in your blessed name, Lord Jesus Christ, amen. Okay, it's Natera. So what I want to do is introduce Christine Seto and Trudy McKenna from Natera. And this company is it's a genetic testing company, just to keep it really simplified, but it's a lot more detailed than that. And what I wanted to do, Matthew Rabinowitz is the founder of Natera, and that's Natera. And his introduction to their website was quite entertaining for me. It made me understand what this company does. He says, in 2004, my sister gave birth to a son with Down syndrome. He passed away 6 days after birth. It was a devastating experience for our entire family. And I founded Natera because I believe all families deserve access to technologies that offer early detection of genetic disease. I can't think of a better way to phrase what you guys do, Christine and Trudy, than what he just said in this statement. It's profound in my book. And I will tell you that in my lifetime as a transplant recipient of over 30 years, I've been waiting for this time because I was told my condition was not genetic. And now I've come to find out there are some components of genetics within the FSGS community. And although it's a small percentage, it's still there. All right. So I am really glad to have these two gals on. They're going to tell you about this company. And I'm going to try to prompt them with some questions, but I think they're going to tell me what I want. What you're going to hear is what this company is all about. And I'm glad of that. So welcome.
Thank
Christine?
you. Yeah, no, thank you. And,
Yeah.
I'm really glad you read that bio about Matt Rabinowitz, because really he's just been really an inspiration to a lot of people who work at the company. His passion and his drive to really change the way medicine is being applied. And so I'm really glad you took that extra step to read about him.
Yeah. There's, I had told you earlier on that I have a nephew who they had a child and it was born without kidneys, which it's a term called renal agenesis. and that baby died a few hours. They could have done an abortion, and they could have done all of these things. They could have taken the baby early on, but they chose not to. And so that, along with this Down syndrome business about genetic testing, really interests me. It has interested me a long time. They held that child in their arms. All the kids, they had 3 other children. Those children got to hold that baby before it died. And so I think that's life. And I think genetic testing brings life. And that's what we want. It's not to explore. It's actually to help people get better and kind of give us some prediction, give us some kind of insight into what's going on. So let's start out with, when you look at genetic testing, unless Christine, do you want to talk about a little bit about Natera, or do you just want to kind of just tell me about what genetic testing is all about?
Sure. I mean, I've been at Natera for 4 years, and the company when I first started was primarily women's health, right? So we were doing testing for carrier screening, NIPT, and then we realized that this technology can be applied to a lot of other areas. So then we opened and launched the oncology business, and then just most recently we started this in what we're calling the organ health, but really in the transplant and in the kidney disease. And so you can see we're kind of leveraging our core technologies and applying it in different areas.
Yeah, that was an interesting way to put it together, and organs instead of a given organ, but all organs. It's not just one like that kidney. Trudy, what about you?
We originally were the transplant division because we launched our transplant assessment test. But the reason we're here today with the Renocyte genetic testing was actually, I'm glad you reminded me of the quote from Matt Rabinowitz, because it really speaks to how we launched our genetic testing. Was that when we were talking to nephrologists and providers about our transplant assessment cell-free DNA test, we kept hearing from nephrologists, well, you're a genetic testing company. Do you have a genetic test for kidney disease for adults? And the first time we heard it, we kind of said, no. We were so focused on launching the other test, we didn't even think about it, but we kept hearing it. And then we really thought about it instead of, and this is what I really love about Natera too, is we said, this is really an unmet need, it sounds like. And we did a lot more research, and we realized that these providers were asking us to help them with something that they didn't feel like they had all the tools to provide to their patients at the level that they wanted to do it. And so it was because of that nephrology community that we even, within a year, figured out, okay, let's actually have some genetic testing that is, accessible and affordable for patients and providers with adult kidney disease. And so that's kind of where we are.
So we have a combination of, OB, and you'll get into that and everything, but kidney. But what happens if I go ahead and get some testing? I'm positive. I mean, I have a genetic hit, or Explain that concept to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, it would be a simple blood test or a cheek swab test. So we send the test in, and then we get the results back. And if it's a positive result, what that means is, specifically to the Renocyte test, is we have 382 genes on the panel. And that means that we found a genetic change, or sometimes it's called a mutation, in one of those genes. And so that would tell us specifically what gene, what did we find that change in? What did that change do to the protein? Was it supposed to do? What is it not doing anymore? So it gives us a little bit of an idea of what causes this person's symptoms from a genetic level. And so it can give somebody a diagnosis. So you may have a clinical diagnosis of, say, high blood pressure, right? But that maybe isn't telling you exactly why you have kidney disease. And now we say, oh, you have Alport syndrome, and that's causing kidney disease, and it's causing a high blood pressure. So it puts a name to that. That's not just necessarily giving a name, but it's also all of those things that go along with, now that you have a diagnosis, what can you do with that additional information?
Yeah. So what would the physician do? So you send him the results, and he looks at it, and he reads it back to himself, and he says, okay, what does this really mean? What does the result give him?
Yeah, a lot of times it depends on the actual result, but there's a couple different things that we look at. For one, it's really important sometimes just to confirm a diagnosis. So for example, with PKD, what if it's something where there's no family history and there's a few cysts? So it's kind of a borderline diagnosis. This can actually give the diagnosis to the provider to say, okay, manage this, or if it's negative, rule that out. There's also things like, depending on the specific change, does it give us some information about how this disease might progress? So the provider can actually talk to the family and the patient about, okay, we think that this is going to be the disease course, or more likely the disease course with this specific diagnosis. As with any genetic condition, there's always immediate impact to family members too.
Oh gosh.
So,
yeah.
As soon as you have that diagnosis, we know, okay, this is how this change is inherited. And this is what here's other family members. What does your family history look like? Are there other people who could be at risk to, developing chronic kidney disease? Can we diagnose them earlier before they're symptomatic? Is there other people who maybe are reassured that they're not at risk because of the way this is inherited? So it gives a lot of information to the family members as well.
I can tell you that having had this 33 years ago, it would have been a way for, I biopsy of FSGS, and then you're probably diagnosed pretty darn early, and you can treat the symptoms of the follies of the illness, high blood pressure, and a protein loss, and just the general wasting that this disease causes, FSGS. But it does tell you have FSGS along with your biopsy, and it has probably gonna predict some kind of course for you then.
And actually, FSGS is one of the first things that a lot of providers tell us that they're really interested in doing genetic testing on, because that's something that they know has a real benefit in knowing. FSGS is just describing the symptoms that we're seeing, but we still don't know why it's there. And if we knew more about why it happened, we can tailor our treatment. So if it's a genetic cause and there's not an underlying immune problem, then more immunosuppression probably doesn't do anything.
Probably wouldn't help anything. Yeah.
With the genetic diagnosis, it's more likely to progress no matter what you do. But the good news is, with the counseling a family about transplant, is it's very unlikely to recur because your body is not going to have the same type of immune response. So there's that reassurance. It's kind of that double-edged sword. Okay, it's probably going to progress to the point where you may need a transplant, but then once you have that transplant, then the prognosis is very good that you'll do well on that. So there's definitely immediate modifications that you can make if you find that out.
Right, and if you find out it's not genetic, then you know what the course is, and chances are that this would reoccur. So it's like you said, it's a double-edged sword. Some people say, I want to know what it is so I can do it. And physicians want to know too, so that they can set a course. So I think that's a very good point to make, that it's genetic now we're talking about. So like in the kidneys and stuff like that, we're talking at the podocyte level, we're talking about internal makings in the kidney itself, where things are converted. So genetic testing is here to stay, and it's only going to get better in my mind.
Exactly. We're at the very beginning of figuring this out. And one of the things that's, to me, because my background's in genetic counseling, I was a clinical genetic counselor for many years before joining Natera, and is learning about all of these different ways that genetics can cause different diseases and all the things we don't know. And that's, clinical trials and, clinical trials finding new drugs and targeted therapies. This is also where genetic testing can be really valuable to do all those things.
Yeah, we think about just that it's going to tell you about a disease process, but there are a lot of things within the process itself that can be mitigated if you knew what it was. So
exactly.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so now to the proverbial question: how much does this cost? What's it going to cost Joe Klein down the road here?
Yeah, I get the test. I feel like that is like the second, after your first question of how does this benefit me, this is the most common question that we get from, patients and providers, is how much it costs. And, I can't speak for other companies, but at Natera, we really are trying to make this test and genetic testing accessible for all patients. And so, what we found is that most patients really have little to minimum out-of-pocket expense. So we try to make it really simple and bucket it into sort of 3 buckets. If you are a patient and you have a government insurance, for instance, Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE.
TRICARE,
you shouldn't really expect any out-of-pocket cost by doing our test. The second category is, if you have commercial insurance. And in this case, we're trying to take out the surprise of this. We don't want patients to suddenly get an unexpected bill in their mail of like, oh, I didn't expect this to cost, X amount of money, and be upset. So we do a cost estimate. And if we estimate that the out-of-pocket cost will exceed $349, then we reach out to the patient and we offer them a discounted cash pay price. So they don't have that, a surprise.
Explain that a little closer. A chance to pay cash up front to get a reduced bill.
Yeah, exactly. So then we, essentially we don't bill the insurance, and then they could have a reduced. They basically do an out-of-pocket cash pay price.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, because some people would like to just do that.
Exactly.
Because it's not covered. Just because it's not covered doesn't mean a person doesn't want to do it.
Yes, exactly.
If they're self-pay, that doesn't mean they're going to pay. It means that they have the opportunity. They want to be briefed on it, and they will pay usually, because if they want it, they'll pay up front.
Yeah, exactly.
So, good deal.
And then the third one is we actually have something called the Compassionate Care Program. And so you have to meet certain federal income criteria. And in those cases, a patient will pay anything from nothing to a maximum of $149. And we will actually do the paperwork. You can, and we'll look into that for you as well. So you just have to put in an application, and we kind of handle it for you as well.
Okay, Natera sent me a box. You did, I think.
I did.
Yeah. So first time I went around and I just kind of blew the test. I had a cup of coffee, in the morning, and I just went swab because I'm an RN. I understand it. I did it. And then I read the instructions, like most men do. After they do something, they read the instructions. And it said, no eating beforehand, about a half hour. Well, instead of just sending it back to you, I called you and said, hey, guess what? And you said, fine, we'll send you another one. My point is that you guys are very amiable about making sure that this is right. Okay. So if people do this test and they mess up, you need to get back with Christine or anybody else and tell them the story, tell them the truth. Because this is a very delicate test. It's not something that you just pass off as real easy and simple. So that's my cue on that one. So
yeah, no, we want to make sure that a patient isn't, I was worried that you would be waiting weeks, and then you would be like, shoot, this is an inconclusive test result. So, we want to make sure that when they submit a test that, in the 3 weeks or so time that we get a result back, that you get a result. So
that's
we're really
right.
conscious about making sure that our test is, meeting the quality standards and everything like that. So
I don't know if I told you or not, but I went to the doctor they had the test kit there. They said, why didn't you come to us? And I said, it's not a matter of coming to you. It's just the fact that they offered, because I'm going to do a podcast. I went through the whole thing. And I just wanted you to know that the doctors in Kerrville are using it.
Great.
So that's great. How long does it take to get it back? Usually if they send you a kit, right?
Yeah, we send a kit, and once you submit it, it's about 3 weeks to get a test result.
Yeah, it's not instantaneous, so it's going to take you. Got to be a little bit patient. And then, how about confidentiality? I mean, this is borders on DNA and all that kind of stuff. And what about confidentiality and all of this? Keeping it to yourself. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, everything at Natera, just like with any of our patient tests, we've been in the patient testing business for a decade, is treated with the utmost confidentiality. Everything is subject to the HIPAA rules and regulations. So the only person that is authorized to get your result is your provider. They'll share it with you. Patients are allowed to also, call in and ask about, they can have pre and post test genetic information sessions with one of our genetic counselors before they have the test, after they have the test. But that's all within, their own confidentiality. Nobody can call and ask for your results, or we can't share those, or we wouldn't share those either with anyone else.
No, like in my case, my nephrologist knew about it because I told him I needed him to sign the order. He said, no problem.
No, we need a doctor's order, but between you and your doctor, that's about it.
Yeah. And then his response was, geez, they're going to finally figure out what's wrong with you after all these years. I said, I doubt it. Is there any discrimination in testing? Because I know that there is in in allocation of organs and stuff like that. If you have what kind of opportunities do people who are not underprivileged or in areas where they don't usually get this kind of testing, are there ways you can help in that?
Yes, I think Christine described some of the, compassionate care programs that we have where you
Right.
could, based on, pay zero out of pocket. I don't know if there's more like other than the financial impact. I think one of the
Right.
things that we are working on is, we want to look into a lot of education and making sure that we educate, all patient populations and patients who are maybe in populations that are more severely affected by chronic kidney disease. And can we understand better what some of those causes are? And there are some genetic conditions that are more common in certain ethnic backgrounds. We want to make sure that is, the providers understand that,
Right.
and that patients are kind of aware of that, and maybe are empowered to also ask their providers for genetic testing based on, their family history or something else going on in their symptoms. That's very, very appropriate.
Yeah, like I said, we were really trying to make this accessible regardless of, race or, economic background. And so we do try to have programs so that, anybody can really access this test if they need it.
Okay, so therein lies the rub, because a lot of communities, especially rural communities, they may have sketchy or minimal coverage from kidney specialists, and a lot of times people like NKF or AAKP or other organizations, AKF, will come in and they will do what we call screenings. But what they do is they don't do lab tests; they do urine test, and then they do an EGFR. But do you ever see the possibility that some type of swab or genetic testing would be possible in that arena, or is this past and just going to be in the doctor's realm?
Are you talking like a direct to patient platform?
Yeah. Is that even thinkable, or would that be some way you would go with that, or is it just not going to happen?
Probably not right now to have, because I think one of the things too with genetic testing, what makes it a little bit different than maybe like just a urinalysis is, with urinalysis, you're going to look and get some results and maybe find
It's
some
instantaneous,
and find some abnormalities that are, that could diagnose a problem. With genetic testing, I think one of the differences, and we've kind of touched on why this is, you really want to have the person having genetic testing to know, what is the genetic testing that I'm doing? Do I want to have it? Do I understand what the results will tell me, won't tell me? And so it's really not something where it would maybe be the most responsible thing to just kind of throw it out to everybody and not have that pre-test education. And if somebody, so that being said, I think it is appropriate to educate people, here's what's available with genetic testing, and here's maybe why you would want to have genetic testing, and is genetic testing right for you, and what are some of the main concerns that you might have. And then if somebody reading that says, yeah, this sounds like something I really want to do, then they're empowered to, ask their provider perhaps for it if the provider's not the one that's, bringing it to them. And so I think that's kind of the way that we like to look at that, is it's still a team between the provider and the patient to move that.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't push out. This is not going to be a screening technique, because it's going to take a lot of consultation with the professional staff, somebody who gets it. And, just to go and screen it. But my point was that it's not going to actually get down on the level. This is a high-tech test that needs to be monitored, number one. And number two, you need counseling with it. And I think that's, I didn't want people to think, well, that sounds like something anybody could do on a street corner. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. I think Christine mentioned cost was a main barrier. And then one of the other main barriers for both providers and for patients was just access to, genetic services, or somebody that they could call and, like you said, in rural areas, there's not a whole lot of genetics centers, and there's genetic counselors, but they tend to be at larger academic centers. And so that can be a real barrier. But that's why also Natera, we really started thinking about it based on that nephrology feedback I was telling about earlier, was we actually are very well set up to do all of that education and that consenting of patients, because we have 50 board certified genetic counselors on staff, and we don't charge for that genetic consultation. So a patient can call in, schedule a 15-minute pre-test session with a genetic counselor just to kind of talk about, do I want this test? What is this test? Just like you said, what can I do with a positive result? What do I do with a negative result? And then really decide, is this the right test for me? And then if they decide, yes, it is, and after they get the test result back, the provider provides them with the results. Then they also have the option of connecting back with a genetic counselor after the test to say, okay, now I have my results. Can you just run this by me again? Like, what does this mean? What do I do next? I have some other questions. And so it really can close that loop to do that. And if there's additional needs that are met, that's just probably a minority of patients after that point. I have other family members I want to get tested, or I have more complicating issues going on. Then, you can get referred to a genetics center, but really most of the needs from understanding a genetic test can really be served in those sessions,
Sure. And you can, like I said, your physician, your nephrologist in the kidney sense, can call a center of excellence and talk to them and call you, and you can refer them to the specialists in the consultation. So it's covered. It's a good thing. This genetic testing is going to go a long way, I think. Can you go back and talk about rare diseases? How effective a test is this for it, and how is it applied?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think everybody knows about autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease and Alport syndrome. Those are the two most common. But then the incidence of genetic causes for kidney disease really there's a kind of a long tail, we call it, of a lot of different things that are just not as common, the ones and twos here and there. And we were just looking at our data from our first 1,000 Renasight tests, and it was exactly what we thought. A lot of people with polycystic kidney disease, a lot of people with Alport syndrome, and then a lot of people with, one or two people with this gene and one or two people with this gene. And there's just a lot of these rare conditions. And that's one of the things that we looked at when we were deciding what actually makes a good genetic panel for kidney disease.
Yeah.
And looking at all of the literature and all of the things, like how often are things reclassified, and if you have an unknown cause, like what are all the different things it could be, and how rare so many of these things are, we wanted to make it broad enough that it captured as much of that as we could. So if you have a rare cause of your rare genetic cause, we only have to order one test, right? There's one broad panel. There's 382 genes on it now. There's a good chance that we could catch what's going on. It doesn't test for every single thing. So it's not like it's completely comprehensive, because that'd be thousands of genes and nobody wants results on thousands of genes. We really tried to make it like, what is really, what's a good sized bit of information that a provider and a patient can kind of look at and say, this is the right amount of information for me to ask, and we're not. So I think, to answer your question, yes, this panel, these genetic tests are really designed to pick up a lot of those rare conditions and some of these things that we've never heard of before,
Exactly. Yeah.
And really learn more about them. And some of the things that we're finding now that we're starting to get results back is maybe some of these actually aren't that rare, but they present really differently in different people. So it's really hard to put one diagnosis on it, because there's just a lot of variability in how people live with different conditions.
Talk to me about that Apilo-1. That's I know we have some people that listen that have heard about that. So how about that?
That APOL1, or sometimes we call it APOL1, we haven't really decided. I don't know. There's consensus about what you call it. That's something that is actually unique on the Renasight panel. So every gene on our panel is what we call monogenic, meaning there's a single gene and it causes a single genetic condition. Like this gene causes Alport syndrome, this gene causes ADPKD. With APOL1, what's a little different about that is it's actually a predisposition gene. So whether you could have this changes in the APOL1 gene and maybe never develop chronic kidney disease, but it puts you at a higher risk over your lifetime to develop chronic kidney disease. And so this is on the panel. We look to see, do you have 2 normal copies, 1 normal copy, and 1 change copy, or 2 change copies? And the people that have the highest risk lifetime of developing chronic kidney disease are the people who have 2 changed copies of that APOL1 gene. But again, the vast majority of people who have that don't end up ever developing chronic kidney disease. We think that that again kind of sets the stage, but then there's probably some other kind of second hit to develop like a glomerular disease.
Yeah, something like on the backside of it. Yeah.
Yep. And we don't know, like sometimes that could be a virus, sometimes it could be some autoimmune disorder, sometimes we have no idea what it was, but it just is what the trigger is for some kind of kidney disease. And that's actually very common. That's one of the most common diagnoses after ADPKD and Alport syndrome. APOL1 is very common, with the two changes.
Okay, so I want to slip outside just a little bit. I want to just slip outside of kidneys. This is not going to take very long. I want you to tell me other things that Natera does in this world, what you do. Okay, I know you have some OB stuff, and I know you look into cancer and stuff like that. That has importance, and I think people would listen to that kind of thing. So, what else do you do?
Well, let me tell you a little bit. Maybe as a good segue is, you asked one of the things that you can like what is one of the benefits of maybe doing renocyte genetic testing? And one of them is if you find a mutation in a family that says, okay, this change causes this disease in this family, you can actually then use that information to do what's called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, or PGD. Sometimes it's called PGT. What that is you can actually use that information that we got and then test embryos before they're implanted through IVF to say, okay, for example, say we found a family and they had ADPKD in the family and they found the mutation that causes ADPKD. Then a couple could decide to do IVF, have their embryos tested, and then only implant the embryos that didn't have ADPKD, so they could be sure that their child would not develop PKD. And so that test, that pre-implantation genetic testing, was the very first test that Natera launched back, I think it was in 2009. And then that's where they built their prenatal testing portfolio. So built from there, carrier screening. Are families at risk to have children with genetic conditions? And sometimes early diagnosis means that you can actually prevent a lot of the, sad outcomes. If you diagnose it right after, when a baby's born or before a baby's born, can you manage it better?
Yes.
And then same thing with prenatal screening. Can we screen pregnancies if they're a high risk for certain conditions? And then can that management, change, the pregnancy management change? Can we improve care? Can we rule out conditions if a family is worried about certain things and give them that reassurance during pregnancy? And so that's really where the prenatal, the women's health organization really is founded in those tests. And then we did, as Christine mentioned earlier, spin out to a business unit for oncology. So we have
that oncology was one that interests me. I thought that was really...
Yeah, one of the things that we're really good at is finding little bits of DNA in your bloodstream called cell-free DNA that isn't from you. And so when you're pregnant, we look at the DNA that's from the placenta, so it's from the baby. That's where we can do some tests on the baby with just a blood draw on mom. In the organ health, we do that on the donor kidney. So can we look at how much kidney is from the donated, or how much DNA is from the donated kidney in a patient's blood and determine if they're at a higher risk for rejection? And then in cancer, what's really cool is that's can come from the tumor. So can we find little bits of DNA from a tumor that could indicate, say, post-surgical resection of a tumor, whether or not you got all of the tumor? So what you want to see is a negative result.
Somewhere, yeah. So that's what got me. This is just a fantastic field. And I'll give you just a second here to tell me if there's anything else that you would like to talk about before I start trying to wind this down, because this has been very interesting. And is there anything else that you want to touch on?
I think I would love for people to hear, that Natera's mission really is that, like you described in Matt Rabinowitz's opening statement, that really is something that we take to heart, that we've always looked at. We want people to have accessibility. We want them to have access to all the tests equally, and we want them to be educated and feel like they have a place to go to be educated. And so if anybody has questions, I would really encourage them to go to the website, to get in touch with somebody at Natera, to talk to their provider if they have questions about genetic testing, because we're really here to help people through that.
Well, I'm going to go ahead, Christine.
I think the only other thing that I wanted to also is that, I think Trudy and I talked about this, is how much the tests in general are just sort of patient driven, right? Patient initiated. And I get emails and stuff from the websites about patients who are interested in the test, and they reach out to me, how do I get this test? And so, maybe if there's, we're happy to provide information afterwards. If there's somebody who wants, genetic information on either a information session with a counselor, they want to talk about their condition, we can provide information on how to get in touch with that. As if you want to bring a test kit to your doctor, we can provide information on how to do that. And just making sure that for those who are interested in learning more, that, that there's a path there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I really appreciate you guys coming on. I think we've done due diligence here, and I hope that you're content with that. I just wanted for the people, I just wanted to, maybe somebody, I just want to reread the statement again, because it's just impelling to me. So this came from Matthew Rabinowitz, who is the founder of Natera. And he said, in 2004, my sister gave birth to a son with Down syndrome, and he passed away 6 days after birth. It was a devastating experience for our entire family. So he founded Natera because I believe, this is what you pointed out, all families deserve, access to technology that offer early detection of genetic diseases. The key fact here is that all families deserve that access. That doesn't always happen, but that's your emphasis at this company. I always wanted, and I know a couple other companies that I've talked with, and they're pretty much in the same realm. It's not about money; it's about taking care of people, and I think that's a very honorable place to be. So, thank you. I just want to just tell my followers out here, anybody who's listening, if you have information, that's all you got to do is go to their website, Natera.com. And there's plenty of information out there, and you can pick up these gals' numbers and call them and talk to them. This is an open company. It's not a huge company, and it's not really small, but it's not huge. Okay. So it's more personable, I think. It's more blended with what we see in the nursing community of patient-focused and patient-centered. That's, to me, that's the emphasis that is placed at Kidney Solutions, and with a company like this, it's patient-centered, patient-focused. We want the patient and their families to get the best. We mean that. So after listening to this, you want to make sure you go ahead and share it with other people, and just kind of give us a comment. If you didn't like certain parts, or if you really did, just comment on it. Just don't pass by and listen. Go ahead and sign up for it and give us a comment. Remember, now we're in a serious situation here with COVID. COVID is out there yet, and no matter what time you listen to this or when you do, you have to take care of yourself. I mean, speak specifically to kidney patients, specifically to transplant patients. You have no other source of help except yourself. If you need help, it's out there, but you're the one that has to initiate that. You have to take care of the kidney that you've been given. You have to take care of everything that's important to you. Just not the kidney, but your family. So you have to protect yourself. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to be true to yourself, take care of yourself, and be really mindful that if you're not here, your family's going to suffer. So, till the next time, keep breathing.